My name is Derek. I'm 42 years old, and I've been working in tech since I was barely aware of it. You might not believe it, but I didn't start from a place of light and hope. No, I started from a dark place, where I didn't know where I was going. After a divorce that I never imagined I'd be able to handle, I was on the brink. No house, no money, no future. My only hope was I found a job. That was River Manufacturing, a small company with outdated technology, a wreck, to say the least. If you think I found a stable career, you're wrong. They needed me, but I wasn't the first choice. They needed someone who could fix what was broken, and no one else had the guts to do it. And I was just a guy trying to make it through the storm in my life. But then something changed inside me. I didn't just want to fix what was broken. I wanted to rebuild. I started with outdated computers, unprotected systems, and disconnected networks. There I was, working tirelessly with one goal in mind: to create a strong system, to protect the company, to protect my job, to protect everything I had worked for. I didn't just fix it, I rebuilt it. I turned old systems into modern, smooth-running, secure technology. I worked tirelessly nights, weekends, and every day I felt like I was building my own little empire. No one knew me, but I knew who I was. I was the one who made this company exist. I was the one who made Riverton able to deal with terrifying cyber threats without flinching. But things don't always go as planned. Every time my system works smoothly, I feel a small change. Gradually, I became an indispensable part of the company. From a man who had just divorced, from someone who had nowhere to go, I became the person behind the success of Riverton. And I believed that I would always be there. I built all this, and I believed that I would never be replaced. This company has become my second family. The people I work with, they are not just colleagues, they are friends. We have overcome many difficulties together. And I believe that everything I do will always be recognized. I never thought that I could be replaced. But now, when I sit here, looking back at everything, I realize that I was wrong. I believed too much in what I built. Things cannot continue as before. There's one thing I always remember. When I worked all night, when I sacrificed myself so that the company could survive, I never thought that one day I would have to face this betrayal. Everything I've done, all the tiring hours I put in, would not be able to protect me from a change that I was never prepared for. And now, when I'm at this point in my life, looking back at what I built, I can't help but wonder, can I continue on this path, or will it all be erased? All that I've created, is it still valuable? But there's one thing I know for sure. I won't let what I've done be buried. And this fight, it starts here. Because if I don't protect what I created, who will? At that time, I had no idea that the meeting that afternoon would change everything. Preston, my CEO, had invited me to a fancy restaurant for lunch. It was a restaurant where important meetings of the company often took place. But I could not have imagined that lunch that day would be the beginning of a big shock. When I sat across from Preston, he started with compliments. He said that I had played an important role in the development of the company, that I had protected Riverton from cyber attacks and helped the company grow strongly. And in that moment, I felt proud because what I had done was not in vain. But then, Preston's next words left me speechless. Derek, Preston said, we need a new element, a modern look at technology. The company is changing and we need people with a fresh vision. That was like a slap in the face. I never thought that those compliments were just a preparation for announcing that I was being replaced. And then his next sentence about Nathan, the boss's nephew, a recent MIT graduate and a digital transformation expert, added fuel to the fire. He was my replacement. Nathan was trained in Silicon Valley, a man I had never met, but I knew immediately I had no place here. Everything happened so fast. I didn't know how to react. I just smiled. I didn't want to cause trouble right away. I understand that in this job, big decisions are sometimes inevitable, but inside, I had an uneasy feeling. I knew something was wrong. I could feel the change, and I felt betrayed. That meeting ended very quickly. Preston signed an NDA, asked me to help Nathan with the transition, and gave me a 6-week period to gradually back out. I didn't say anything more, just signed and left. But as soon as I got back to the office, I realized that everything had changed. My access to the company's system was restricted. I was no longer invited to the management meetings that I regularly attended. I didn't understand why, but the feeling of losing control was gradually rising inside me. At that point, I started to notice little things. Little signs that the change was planned. My system, the documents I had drafted, were all deleted from public folders. No one was contacting me about unfinished projects. And when I checked the network, I saw some unusual access. There was a strange IP address accessing documents and systems that only I had access to. Everything was being penetrated without my knowledge. I found traces of silent attack, not from the outside, but from within the company. Not only was I replaced, I realized that these people were taking advantage of what I had built. All the knowledge I had, all the technological secrets I developed, were now being quietly compromised by these people. They were not only removing me, but they were also silently exploiting information from me. I couldn't stand by and watch my work being erased. I had to do something. A sense of guilt welled up inside me. I had trusted these people too much. But now, I had to find out the truth. Who was behind this game? And could I take back what was mine? And that's when I decided I wouldn't let them win. I wouldn't let what I had built be destroyed. From now on, I wouldn't stand by and watch. I would find out the truth, and I would take back what was mine. I couldn't just sit there and watch this company, what I had built, be destroyed without doing anything. I started going through every piece of information, every document, every note, every email, looking for signs that the company had deliberately hidden. And what I discovered was an unexpected truth. Riverton was preparing for an acquisition. TechCore Industries, a large corporation from Boston, was approaching to buy the company. And you know what? What I had built, all the systems that I had poured so much sweat into, were now being exploited to glam the company, to make the company look modern in the eyes of investors, all in the service of selling the company. They didn't care about me, didn't care about what I had done. They just wanted to use my work as a tool to add value to this deal. But that wasn't all. What made me even angrier was that I discovered that Nathan, the nephew Preston had brought in to replace me, hadn't been a coincidence. He had been planted in the company for months. He wasn't just a new hire. He was part of a plan to replace me, to slowly weed me out of the company without anyone knowing. Everything I had done, all the hard work I had put in, was being used to pave the way for Nathan to take over. At that moment, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't just sit here and wait for this to end. I needed to meet people I could trust. I called Luis, who I considered a friend, and Vanessa, my teammate who had been working with me all this time. I needed to know more about what was going on in the company. I sat with Luis in the coffee shop, and he looked at me with a hesitant look, as if he were keeping a secret. And then, finally, Luis sighed and said that he had been asked to explain all the systems I had built. They asked him to detail every piece of software, every system, every action I had taken. Luis looked at me and said, "They're preparing for a change, Derek. We're no longer part of the big decisions. They don't need us anymore." I looked into Luis' eyes, and I knew that I couldn't stand still any longer. We were being excluded from every major decision, every meeting, every development strategy. And I realized that I was no longer considered part of the future of this company. And then I decided I couldn't continue to let them take advantage of my efforts without getting anything in return. I had spent years building and developing everything. I couldn't let these people take it all away without proper compensation. Not only were they removing me from the company, they were also trying to take the intellectual property that I had developed. The tools, the systems, all of it was my product. I had built a strong security system, a technology that no one in the company could understand better than me. I knew every nook and cranny of it, and I couldn't let it fall into the wrong hands. I started looking for ways to protect what was mine, from the legal documents, the original contracts, to the terms I signed when I joined the company. I would demand compensation for my intellectual property, demand compensation from the company for what I had created, and I would not stop until I got justice. Because I knew if I didn't stand up for what I had done, if I didn't fight to keep what was mine, who would? This company has nothing that hasn't gone through me. And if necessary, I would make them pay for what they did to me. This fight is not just about my job or my position anymore. It's about protecting the work and the value that I've put in. And I won't let anyone take away what I created. No one has a right to do that. I won't back down. This is just the beginning. After I got the severance package the company offered, I knew I couldn't accept it. They wanted me to sign a severance contract for a sum that wasn't even enough to compensate me for the work I had put in over the years. It was like they wanted to kick me out without giving me anything worthy of what I had created. But I knew I couldn't let that happen. I started looking for help. I didn't just want to protect my job, but also my rights to the intellectual property that I had developed before I joined the company. I met with a few lawyers who I could trust and started preparing documents to prove that the tools, the systems that I had developed, were completely my personal property. They thought I would just walk away, letting them take everything I had created. But they were wrong. I wasn't the type of person to be fooled like that. I started digging through every document, every contract before I joined Riverton, every email, every drawing, every source code I had written. I wasn't going to let them take my work without fair compensation. Everything I did had traces, and I was going to use that evidence to fight the company. I had a plan, and I was going to fight to the end, not just to keep my job, but to protect everything I had built. I knew it wouldn't be easy. The company had a plan, and they had a strategy in place to take my intellectual property. But I had important documents, undeniable evidence, and I wasn't going to let myself be pushed out that easily. I met with a team of lawyers, and they helped me build a strong case. We had everything we needed to fight them. And when I brought this evidence to negotiate with the company, I didn't just ask for fairness, I asked for what I deserved. The negotiation wasn't easy, but I fought with all my determination and preparation. I asked the company to compensate me for what I had contributed, and in the end, they had to accept. They agreed to return ownership of part of the system that I had developed, and I received fair compensation for my efforts. But the most interesting thing was Nathan. He thought he was going to replace me and take over all the work, but he ended up being kicked out of the company. The big client threatened to pull Riverton's contract if they kept Nathan on. The company had no choice but to take Nathan out, and that's when I knew their acquisition strategy had failed. In the end, I got what was mine back. I fought to protect my intellectual property, to protect the work I had put in. I wouldn't let this company take away everything I had built. And when I saw Nathan being kicked out of the company, I knew I had won, not because I got my job back, but because I protected my own value. This fight is not just about work. It's about fairness and rights. And I know that in this life, if I don't stand up for myself, no one else will. What I've created, I'll keep, and I won't let anyone take away what I built. So my fight with Riverton is over. But I know that this journey doesn't stop here. Everything I do, I'll defend to the end. And I'll keep going, keep building what I believe in, keep asserting my values, no matter how many difficulties I face. After all that I've been through, I've learned that life isn't always fair, but no one can stop you if you don't let them win. I spent years building my company, but now I don't have to work under control of people who only care about profits. I decided to do something new, more creative. I used the skills and experience I gained from those difficult days to start a new project, my own company. And I didn't do it alone. I recruited loyal teammates like Vanessa and Luis, who have always been by my side, who understood the true value of what I created. We started from scratch, not from failure, but from the lessons I learned from my own struggle. We built a new technology company where everyone has a voice, everyone is valued. No more hasty decisions from people who only care about profits, but creative ideas, real values are respected. We started with the first customers, small but passionate projects. And gradually, everything grew. My company not only survived, but also thrived, becoming a name in the technology industry without having to bow to anyone. We work for passion, not for money. A year later, when my company was growing, I ran into Preston again. This meeting took place in a small restaurant, nothing special, but it meant a lot to me. I no longer felt the same resentment or defeat as before. Instead, I felt a strange sense of relief. Preston looked at me for a while, and finally he sighed and said to me, "Derek, I have to admit you won. You were right. You did the right thing and protected what you created." At that moment, I didn't feel happy or gloating. No, I just felt a sense of peace. Not because I had taken revenge or because I had won against them, but because I had done the right thing. I had protected what was mine, I had kept my values, and that was a real victory. A part of me knows that life will always be challenging, that there will always be hardships, but I also know that I will never let anyone take away my hard work again. I have learned to stand up no matter how hard it is. And with the support of my loyal teammates, I have proven that when you stand up for what you believe in, no one can stop you. Looking back, I have no regrets about what happened. The failures, the hardships, all led me to this point. And now, I can proudly say that I have not only regained what I lost, but also built something bigger, a company of my own, a future that I have complete control over. So my fight with Riverton is over. But my journey, the journey to find my true worth, has only just begun. And I know that I will not stop here. I will keep going, keep building what I believe in, because I know that in the end, life will always give you what you deserve. And I also know one thing for sure. If you stand up for what you believe in, if you never give up, then one day you will win. This journey is not over, and I am ready for the next challenge. Because life always gives you a second chance, and I will take it to do what I believe is right.